Hi, I'm Lara, the founder of New Earth Practitioners. I am here with the renowned artist, Sue Ellen Parkinson. We're here to talk about her experience and her relationship to intuition and in relationship to her art. And so, Sue Ellen, what was the significant turning point for your intuitive development in your life?
Well, I've always been deeply influenced by my dreams, and that's been like a thread throughout my life. Recently, I had my 73rd birthday, and my granddaughter asked me to tell her about the birthdays that were the most important to me. And I had a really hard time remembering it, but I could remember endless dreams that I'd had.
Mm.
But the turning point that I had that I always think back to, and I don't talk about this with many people, I heard a voice. I don't want people to think I'm a crazy person. I
Yeah.
don't often hear voices, but I was about 33 years old, somewhere around there. So this was about 40 years ago. And I was an art director in a publishing house down in Los Angeles. I had two little kids. I was a single mom, and I was really working way too many hours and not getting paid enough for what I was doing. Was a typical situation back in the day that women often didn't make as much money as their male counterparts. What happened was I was always kind of living on the edge financially. I had these two little kids, and what I would do was I'd sit about 20 minutes every morning before I'd go to work. I'd have to get these kids ready and myself ready, take them to their different schools, and then get myself to work in rush hour traffic. So I'd wake up really early, maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I would meditate for about 20 minutes just to get myself grounded before I'd enter the fray, so to speak.
Right.
And I think I'd had my car had broken down or something, and I had some huge expense I had to come up with. It was something like that. And I was feeling very despondent, kind of like, why I work so hard, and why is it that there's no help in the world for somebody like me? So, as I was meditating, I just asked, why is there no help for people like me? I distinctly heard a voice, and it was very strong. And the voice said, "You are the help." And that is not what I wanted to hear because
Right.
I felt like my plate was very full. I heard it very distinctly. And when I got up and I went into work, I was a little rattled by it. I was wondering, am I having a nervous breakdown or something? But there was a woman in the sales department, and we would all go to the coffee room to get our coffee before we'd start. This woman said, I'm going to go volunteer at battered women's shelter in Santa Monica. She said, I feel like my life feels meaningless. Ordinarily, I wouldn't have been particularly interested, but because I just heard this voice, you are the help. I took one of the brochures from her and I read it, and I went and got the training and started helping at this place. And I also started helping to raise money for the homeless shelter in the area. And I was doing a lot of volunteer work. My friends probably thought I'd become unglued at this point because I was busy, but I was also taking care of two little kids. But something happened during that period that I could see the change I could create
Mm.
in other people's lives by helping them. It turned the dial in my mind just enough that I started to see myself as a person with agency, that I could have an effect on others in the world. I think that was one of the biggest turning points in my life. It set the trajectory for, well, until now, even.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's big. Wow. Hmm.
Yeah, this little center that I ended up volunteering at a women's shelter. Now, I wanted to work with adult women because I was around little kids on my time
Right.
off. The only job they had available was taking care of kids or watching the kids while the mothers went to a group therapy session on Saturday mornings. So it was like a 2 hour stint, and it was out in a little enclosed park area under a tree. I had a really hard time connecting with those kids because they were traumatized. They were out of their home. They didn't know what was going on. I just decided, well, what I'm going to start doing is drawing. So
Oh,
I
wow.
bring a great big drawing pad and I sat down in the middle of them and I wouldn't go directly to them, but I'd just start drawing animals and things. Pretty soon, one of them would come over to me, kind of like a little wild animal, and say, "Are you an artist?" And I'd say, "Yeah." "Are you an artist too?" And they'd say, "Yeah." Every single one of them, by the way,
Wow.
was an artist. And I'd set them up, and pretty soon we'd all be drawing. It was really a profoundly life-changing period for me. The kids would often end up going back to their mother. The mothers would end up going back to the abuser.
Yeah.
That's kind of typical. I think it's something like on the average of 6 times. And I started to feel very discouraged and heartbroken at one point. A good friend of mine sent me an article that showed that if a child just has one adult in their life who's steady and caring, it's enough to save them from becoming psychotic. That was
Wow.
one of my turning points.
I would probably say that at least one, if not all, that was a turning point for those children too. Having an adult, being able to be there with them in a quiet way and
Mhm.
opening up to their creativity as a way, as a outlet, it could be really profound.
Mhm.
So, it's amazing how sometimes we'll do something we maybe don't know the total impact
Mhm.
you've had on someone. I've had that experience where people have said something to me years later. Someone will come up and tell me the impact that I've had. I was incredibly grateful and surprised. So that is a wonderful example of listening to that voice, that wherever that voice came from. So now, how do you work with your intuition, and how did you develop your practice with your intuition in your art?
I have been a long time practitioner of both Buddhism and also I've done a lot of work with Jungian practices. I had the great good fortune back in my early no, it was actually my mid 30s, I guess, finding a mentor, and his name was Mukusen Miyuki. He was a 18th generation Buddhist priest from Japan. And he gave me a marvelous gift. I didn't have any money, and when I asked him how much he charged for therapy, he was pretty well known. I did not know that when I approached him, but he was on the board of the Young Institute down in Los Angeles, and he lectured all over the world. So he said, "How much would you want to pay me?" And I said, "I'd like to pay you what I make an hour, but I don't want to insult you." And, and he just laughed at that and he said, "You're an artist. How about you do a drawing of the dream that you're working with me? Write the dream down. And if you'll let me use that in my presentations in Japan, I'll work with you for free." So we became very good friends and he really changed my life, but he taught me this process of dialoguing with all the dream characters that came up. And because I was drawing them, I started dialoguing with this imagery, giving voice to the imagery and having conversations with it. And when I started painting these icons about 10 years ago of the sacred feminine, it was very natural for me to just start dialoguing with those images as well. And what I did not realize when I first began this because I had had no formal training whatsoever, that icons are like visual portals
Wow.
that help you access another field of your consciousness, or if you're very woo-woo, another frequency, however you want to look at it. It's just a wonderful practice, and that's what I do. I also teach soul collage because I wanted to give that gift to other people, and I think collaging an image is such an easy way for people to access their creativity. And then once again, you're giving voice to this aspect of yourself that you've created.
You're opening up to those aspects of yourself.
It's been a continuing thread throughout my life, and it's such a profound practice. It's a mystery to me how it works, but I know when I first started working with the icon of Mary Magdalene, I felt it as a very deep shift within myself. And it was a complete surprise to me. I was not anticipating that. I wasn't raised as a Christian. I came to it as a clean slate, except for what the culture had told me, that I'd just sort of gotten through osmosis. This idea that Magdalene was a prostitute, a repentant prostitute. As I studied her more and worked with her more on a very personal and internal level, I knew that was not true, that she was much, much more than that. I recently heard this really interesting little clip about Steven Weinberg. He was a Nobel laureate scientist back in the 70s, and he had this theory of the multiverse. It was just a theory. He never proved it, but he believed in it very much. They asked him to explain his idea of the multiverse to an average person. And what he said was, when you're sitting in your living room, there are lots, hundreds, infinite number of radio waves coming through your living room, but you have your radio and you just tune into one
Right.
station. Did you
Yep.
hear that?
No, but I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah. So he was saying, in reality, there are many, many radio waves going on
Right.
in your living room. It's just that we are taught to be kind of bifurcated, so we're not in harmony with all those. And when I heard him say that, I thought, that's what it is. That's what happens with painting these icons. If you enter it from a very humble place of just, I want to connect with you, you will feel the connection.
Yeah, absolutely. In
Yeah.
my own experiences of having that myself, in a different way, because for myself, I do clairvoyant readings. And so I see beings without bodies, and it's a very controlled way. So it's not like this out of a lot of people have this fear, kind of like what you mentioned about hearing a voice. So there's a lot of people, including a friend of mine, her husband's a science teacher and he's very sciencey, teaches, he's won awards, and he knows what I do. He kind of took me to the side and almost like this sense of like, I'm going to admit something. I'm going to tell you. He uses this intuition, and it's like he was talking about, which I call that sense, the sensing intuition of where you feel that flow, when something feels there's a flow, and then you can feel when it's not flowing. And it's like this kind of hum or a thread. Some people, it's kind of hard to use your words, and he was talking about how much he uses that. And then he's met the person he's married to now, my really dear friend. He saw her across the street when he was young. He was a new teacher and looking for a place to rent. He saw this young lady walking down, and he heard this voice really loud: go meet her. That's part of what I'm hoping for us to do, reclaiming our intuition, taking the fear and understanding of what it is and being open to it, what you're talking about, the multiverse and the multiple ways of tuning in, that fine tuning, that's what I call that deep listening piece of learning. And the thing that's so amazing about it, what you talk about and touch on, for me, it's this deep, incredible resonance of love. And I know that for yourself, you probably experienced that with Mary Magdalene, is that love. What has been your energetic experience of Mary Magdalene?
She is always loving. And I would say, Magdalene is a good example because she's the one I turn to the most. But all these mystics that I've painted when I've done this process of dialoguing with them, they're always giving nothing but positive affirmation.
Right,
It's never shaming. It's never controlling. It's
right.
never manipulative. It's just affirmation of your life and your heart's desire, really. And that has become my compass in life. Somebody presents themselves as a teacher. Are they making me more aligned and unified with the world? Or is it creating some kind of separation or othering, shaming,
Right.
and blaming? Do I feel less than, or do I feel full of light and empowered and uplifted? You know, when you're feeling uplifted, you've tapped into the real deal.
Yes, absolutely. That is so true. If you have that sense of spaciousness or uplifting or just that feeling of openness, it generally feels positive in
Mm.
what that might be. So a lot of people, that's what I'm working at this time, the point of view video that I'm going to be doing here soon, is intuition is in our feelings. And what I mean by that is the feelings of love or joy or gratitude, that's kind of a different spiritual system in some ways. And what I mean by feelings is like anxiety, for example.
Mhm.
That's usually a thing of, when you start, like when you heard that voice, you went through this point of anxiety, kind of self doubt and rumbling with it a little bit. And
Mhm.
that's really common for people to do. They want something, they're open to something, and then all the anxiety kicks in. Well, the anxiety isn't truthful. The anxiety isn't something that's going to happen. Usually it's our past experiences, our negative bias or imagination, and all those things that, is there. It can actually block us. It's this freezing feeling or a sense of constriction, and being able to tune into what that intuition and guidance is there for your highest good, for your growth, for your development, and whatever that might be for each person. The beauty of it, as I'm listening to what you're saying, is that the wonderful aspect of what you're doing is how much it feeds you. Going back to when you first started with those kids and how that was good for you, but it's also good for others. That's the
Mhm.
beauty of it that I see, is that it's for your highest good. It's there to serve you, but it's not serving you in an egoic way or self. It's also serving others. And
Yeah.
it's just this beautiful rippling effect.
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning, the paradox that culture sort of wants you to conform, society wants you to conform to maybe this idea of what your parents want you to be or what your lover wants you to be or your husband or your children. It's like a little box, this image they want you to be. And yet, when you are true to yourself and you break out of that box and your life expands, they are all applauding you. Because that is really what the culture wants. That's what we want for all of us, to be free, to be open, to be who we truly are. And every time you see a dancer or an artist or somebody singing, even if they're singing off tune, if they're singing with all their heart, we all kind of rejoice, don't we?
Yes, yes, it's so true. I totally resonate with that. For me, it brings me joy when I see someone and you just know they're in their element. it's awe-inspiring or inspiring, period. Or, you know, it's just a gift of witnessing that, to be around that sometimes. Yes, I totally agree with you. If you have people in your life that aren't rejoicing, you could just let those people go by. It's those things of just allowing things to flow. And if one needs to let go of people that are wanting to keep you in that box, then that's okay too. So in that sense of what you're doing now and where you're at now, what have you had to overcome to be comfortable with where you're at now? I'm assuming that you're a lot more comfortable with where you're at now in relationship to your intuition and connecting to the different, as you call them, icons.
Mhm. Well, we could call them mystics too. That's how I feel them in my
Okay.
heart. How do I do? Well, I guess I always try to confront my fears. And one of my fears was always any kind of public speaking. Like something like this that we're doing right now, I would have probably had a nervous breakdown for weeks about something like that. I started doing my work. More and more people, and this has been going on for 7, 8 years now, people have come to me and said, "Will you present at our function?" or "Will you talk at this art gallery?" or they'll interview me online about it. Just having pushed myself to confront my fear on that's been enormously liberating. Every time, oh, it's a quote I heard recently: "On the other side of your fear is everything you've ever wanted." What I really want to do is connect with other
Yeah.
people. I mean, I think that's what most creative people want to do. They want to express, give their sense of joy, their sense of gratitude, and also to connect with others and help others connect with their sense of joy and gratitude. So you can't do that if you hide.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And just the fact whenever anybody creates something, and this always touches my heart, even in a soul collage class where people are making these little cards, these little images, it really takes a measure of courage. Put yourself out there and say, "This is me." And also to claim all these parts of ourselves and say, maybe this is a part of me I'm not so proud of, but it's still a part of me. And I'm going
Right.
to take it in and I'm going to love it and claim it. Every time we claim this multitude of selves that we have, we're a little stronger and we're a little more rooted in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true.
So
Yeah.
then we will be able to stand up and do what we need to do and say what we need to say.
No, that is so true. And I love that idea of
Mhm.
reclaiming different parts. My hope is for people to reclaim more of their intuitive self, that inner guidance or inner compass. Sometimes it's the process of finding guidance when we need it the most, where we come to that point where it happens. For me, what I'm kind of uncovering, and the more and more I do this, how much we're really cared for. And we do have help. We do have, it might come in a form of a person. I've had that happen. I'm sure you've had that happen too. You're sitting in a coffee shop and someone sits down and talks to you, and that's a directed message from source or God, and you just go like, oh my goodness. And you know it at that moment. It could be something as simple as that, or a look. I have had some incredible nonverbal connections with people, and it's wonderful. There's one last question I really would like to ask you, and I haven't asked anybody this, but this just popped up for me as for you. It's what is your hopes and dreams?
Hmm. Well, my hopes and dreams is that I could be free enough that I will have the support that I need in order to really do some pilgrim work right now. I really want to do some traveling to sacred sites. And I also, of course, the underlying thing to any teacher is you want to strengthen and support your community, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm doing that as best I can. It's a roller coaster struggle as a creative person to make a living in this world. So that's always a balancing act. I'd like to get to a point where I don't have to be worrying about that anymore. I don't
Right.
know if it'll happen in this
That's,
lifetime, but
I understand.
that's what I would like. I've come to realize, especially over the last decade or so, that a lot of these internal nudges that I get, I feel like they're nudges from my ancestral line. They've done all this new work in science around epigenetics and discovered that on our DNA, we actually carry memory tags from our ancestry. And they
Yeah.
think it's pretty related to trauma at this point. But my feeling is that we carry the memories of our ancestors' dreams, aspirations, loves, hopes, and joys along with the trauma. For myself, I feel like I'm answering the call of many, many grandmothers behind me who or and aunties and that were creatives that were unable to create.
Right.
And they want me creating right now. So I always have that sense of support in my life. And I think if you can tap into that and realize it's a real thing, I have a friend, Perdita Finn, who's a writer, and she also is a co-founder of an online group, The Way of the Rose. I don't know if you're familiar with it. But Perdita says that we don't really know what imagination is. It
Right.
might be ancestral messages. And I always like to keep that little question out there. Is this an ancestral message?
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And we carry the dreams of our ancestors, and
Mhm.
we have much more of an opportunity to manifest it now more than ever. That's a
Mhm.
beautiful. I love that. That gives me some things to ponder and
Yeah,
sit with.
I feel like there's something about the creative process that actually enlivens those memories. It activates them. So if you're painting and you're in the flow and you're just getting these messages, I feel like they probably are ancestral messages.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of wisdom behind us. We were talking about how the people in the culture are really cheering us on.
Right.
When you do succeed, when you break through, when you make something beautiful in whatever form it is, I feel like our ancestors are doing that for us too.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. What a beautiful. Yeah, that's just really beautiful. I mean, a lot of times, especially talking with you, and I think it's just because of who you are, I'm getting a lot of visuals that are popping up, and it's
Mhm.
just beautiful, beautiful visions. So thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sue Ellen. I really appreciate your time, and we'll talk again.
Thank you, Laura.